Wow, look at your top plays. All of them are TV sized or shorter. Most of them are DT scores. Oh god, you are pathetic. Forming all those ringtone sized maps. Bet you cannot read anything below AR10. How about playing Nomod maps for a change? You should be playing Cameria tech maps. What's that? You don't like his songs? No wonder this game is full of anime crap. You are the reason why Oz is dying. You will never improve in this game. You are a failure, a disgusting weeb, a filthy DT farmer. You don't deserve your rank. You don't deserve anything. Especially not a place in this community. Greetings! So before you start typing angrily in the comment section, this little skit was just a satire to set the stage for this video. Hope I didn't scare you too much with it. Anyhow, this time we will be delving deep into understanding the concept of farming and the Oz community's attitude towards it. This may seem a bit too galaxy-brained to some people, but I think it is important to investigate this issue, since it is the cause of a lot of unnecessary elitism and friction in the community. Also, it's fun researching and discussing such topics, so that is that. Farming is an interesting concept. Even defining farming is not as easy as it may seem. Is farming a bad thing? Does farming make us worse players? What is a farm map? Can you farm stuff other than PP? So yeah, I think we should define farming first before we move further. If you disagree with something along the way, feel free to discuss it in the comment section. Now let's get into it. I asked a bunch of players in private what they think of farming, then I made 2 Twitter polls to confirm my hypothesis. According to my research, people think farming is a mostly neutral activity on Oz, as long as it's not done excessively. So, for example, Rufus is no stranger to farming, but it's okay because he is not a one-trick and he has the skill that matches his rank. As long as you are a good player, most of the community will be fine with some farming. When I asked what people thought how the Oz community itself feels about farming, the results changed. If someone else is observed using the term farm, farming, farmer, etc., then it's perceived as something negative. This phenomenon explains why it's so common for new players to call others dirty DT farmers. As a joke without realizing what they are saying is perceived much more negatively than they mean it. So we know now that farming can be either neutral or a negative term depending on the context, and that being called a farmer hurts much more than calling someone a farmer. Shocker, I know. But that doesn't really give us a definition yet. What do you need to do in order to call it farming? Wait, can we farm other things than PP? Well, of course. It seems like we automatically assume PP farming when talking about farming in general, and even within PP farming in itself, we kind of have a general idea on how people farm and what people farm, which is not surprising given how widespread PP farming is nowadays. But there are many different types of farmers, like SS farmers, scored farmers, farming leaderboard first places, etc. Even so, we will be mostly focusing on PP farming in this video, as that's the most controversial of them all, and you know how much I love that stuff. So what do we need to do to be called farmers? According to the people I asked, there was a pretty unanimous agreement that the only real requirement for farming is the intent. If farming is something that you decide to do, whether you fail or succeed, you are farming. It doesn't matter if you retry or not, because you can play farm maps all day without retrying for the sake of farming PP. Likewise, you can retry a map thousands of times without the intent of farming. It also doesn't matter whether you farm with DT, Hard Rock, Nomod or any other mods, as there are farm maps for all of them. Check the maps top DT players have in their top plays. Some of those are Hard Rock farm maps for mid-tier players and Nomod farm maps for low-level players. Oh what? You are a 6 digit and cannot trade anything below AR10? Damn, that shit sucks. I linked some maps which fit this scaling description in the description box below. There are many more, and some of these eventually became 3 mod farm maps for top players. As top players keep improving, it wouldn't be surprising to see many of today's best DTPP scores become 3 modable in a few years. Which brings us to the topic of farm maps. What is a farm map exactly? I believe there are 2 definitions of the term farm map, although one is used more frequently than the other. One of them is farm maps are maps which give disproportionate amount of PP for their actual difficulty. The other one is farm maps are maps which test raw skills and have the potential to give significant PP. The main difference between these definitions is that while A defines farm maps as the product of an imperfect PP system, B's interpretation would work even in a perfect PP system. Also, definition A is kind of derogatory, while B is a neutral assessment. To illustrate the differences, Blue Zenith 4 dimensions may not be considered a conventional farm map by some, as it takes a great amount of skill to get a high accuracy full combo on the map, and it's quite a prestigious score for the players to have in their top plays. But on the other hand, it has the potential to give extremely high amounts of PP, which is proven by the fact that it held a PP record for some time. Of course, that doesn't mean definition B would consider Centipede a farm map, as it doesn't test basic skills in a manner that is realistic to execute. I think definition A is more prevalent nowadays in the community due to 2 main factors. One is that the PP system is imbalanced. I think everyone can agree with that, perhaps inherently due to its nature. And secondly, there are countless maps pushed into the ranked section which either intentionally abuse the weak points of the PP system or completely ignore the damage they cause. The ranked criteria does not require mappers to balance their maps in line with the capabilities of the PP system, which, if you think about it, is kind of a major oversight from a game design standpoint.
We need to ban PP mappers!
Can you be a little bit more polite and knock before you come in?
The stuff bends over backwards so PP mappers can join this game. We need to do something about it.
And you think screeching and sending mean messages to mappers will help with that?
What else could I do?
There, buddy. It's alright. I know you are really invested in the game, but you can't force change like that.
Jesus!
Okay, why don't you just take your keyboard and send positive messages to the mappers you think make a positive impact into the game. Sending denotes to mappers you dislike is not going to help with your cause, it's only going to make their actions look less bad in comparison. Although it would be ideal to have a perfect PP system, realistically speaking it needs massive amounts of time to be developed. On the other hand, the solution from the content producing side could mitigate the issue with much less effort and expertise by amending the ranking criteria with the capabilities of the PP system in mind. In a nutshell, it takes expertise, time and effort to fix the PP system, which by the way should still be done as much as possible, but creating less ranked content of a certain kind would also help tremendously. Sometimes you can save the world by not doing anything. The conclusion from these assessments is that the term farm map, farming, etc. are mainly derogatory due to the existence of ranked maps which can be accurately described by this definition on the screen. The solution to this problem is either perfecting the PP system, which is a gargantuan task or even an impossible one, or nuking the ranked section retroactively and making sure that no future farm map would pass the ranking process, which would surely cause a massive outrage from both players and mappers. There is a third solution, which is removing the PP system altogether, but it is such an integral part of the game that it's impossible to do so now. Besides the outrage, mentioned before, players would just create third-party sites and measure it there instead. However, there is a middle ground, which would be amending the ranking criteria to consider the capabilities of the PP system and perhaps enlisting some dedicated and experienced players to work alongside the NAT to help them with the assessment. That way, the development of the PP system would have time to catch up to certain mapping styles, at which point they could be pushed through the ranking process. There is a lot of negativity in the community right now towards players who farm and mappers who rank farm maps, which is inevitable due to the competitive nature of the game and the lack of definitive rules in the ranking criteria. The most effective way to reduce this toxicity is by balancing the game either through a better competitive system or sensible restrictions on what gets ranked, or maybe both. Of course, this is all up for discussion, so what do you guys think? Do you have your own definition of farming? Maybe your own solution? Leave your comments down below.
Oops.